Prime Ministers, honorable ministers, distinguished speakers, welcome to the second panel discussion of the high-level plenary session resetting the EU-US synergy towards the Western Balkans. On the first part of the high-level plenary session with this title, we heard the views of the representatives of the European Union and the United States. I think it's high time we heard the views and mainly the expectations of the prime ministers of the region, the ones, as President of the Republic of North Macedonia, Stevo Pentarovski, said, the ones who carry the burden of decisions or non-decisions. And with these words, I would like to call Prime Minister of North Macedonia, Mr. Zoran Zaev, to take the floor. Mr. Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Ministers, friends, Madam Melinda, resetting the EU-US synergy towards Western Balkans show how much the transatlantic synergy is important for us at the Western Balkans, discussed previously by President and now by us, the Prime Ministers, accompanied by Foreign Ministers. Someone calls it resetting, someone calls it restoring, but I dare to say that we need to start transforming the transatlantic relations. 5 years ago, we were witnessing how these transatlantic relations started to deteriorate when the former United States President Donald Trump started to pull out United States of America from Paris Accord, World Health Organization, and threatening the leave United Nations and NATO as well. Those were difficult days for liberal democracies, for the Western democracies. On the other hand, European Union, in these circumstances, with having no unilateral voice and how to respond on these attempts, additionally increased the fear that the transatlantic ties, broken as they were, will decrease security and stability in vulnerable region. When it comes to the Western Balkans, one thing is very certain. When transatlantic ties are strong, the Western Balkan is strong and stable. And when these ties are weak, Western Balkans are getting weaker. That is why I strongly claim that the transatlantic ties must be transformative in order to respond to any challenge that we all might face in future. And this response should be unanimous, strong, stable, swift, and decisive. At the recent NATO summit, I had the honor to represent my country, North Macedonia, for the first time at full member. We cherish our place at the table as equal to all. This year, we are celebrating 30 years of independence, and I am very happy to say that at our 30th anniversary of independence is celebrating as 30th member of NATO. I am honored as well that I had the opportunity to fulfill the dream of many generations of citizens of the North Macedonia. NATO membership was a realization of our strategic goal, and it is among our biggest foreign policy achievements. NATO membership is a reflection of our sovereign choice and testimony of our strong cross-party and societal goal to become fully integrated in Euro-Atlantic family of nations. Today, North Macedonia has improved security and stability, and so does the Western Balkan region. We are committed to a vision of Balkan in 21st century as a region of peace, stability, and increased regional cooperation for economic benefit and prosperity of all citizens. That was possible because of Prespa Agreement. That was possible because of Ohrid Framework Agreement. That was possible because of the agreement for friendship and good neighborhood with Bulgaria. That was possible because we had the support of both European Union and United States partners. The recent successful NATO summit, with the adoption of the strategic document NATO 2030, we recommit to the essential principles of the alliance and partnership with political actions and practical tools. One day later, after NATO summit, the EU-US summit proved that these transatlantic ties need to be stronger, stable, effective, inclusive, and with regular dialogue and setting up joint transatlantic agenda for the post-COVID era. The world has changed substantially. We need to be able to adapt and to do that fast. Each crisis we face should be used as opportunity to strengthen these ties. Our second strategic aim is full membership in the European Union. I must say that the last year, after decision in March 2020 to start negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania, unfortunately, due to unprincipled position of our neighbor Bulgaria, the first IGC didn't take place. 2 weeks ago, I led a delegation of the government of North Macedonia to Bulgaria with open head and helping hand stretching for a solution, and moreover with readiness to take a step in a positive direction with the Republic of Bulgaria. Although we made a joint positive step, unfortunately, despite clear and unequivocal messages from the entire international community that now is the time to find a breakthrough, our Bulgarian counterparts failed to gather enough strength and to approve the start of North Macedonia's negotiation in the European Union. Regardless of our restrained expectation, European Union's decision not to schedule the first IGC was a great disappointment both for North Macedonia and Albania as well. It was a huge failure of EU enlargement policy and a very bad message for the whole region. EU failed to keep its promise. As the Prime Minister and my dear friend Eddie, I both said, the European Union can set integration talks, deadlines, task dates. However, the European Union cannot determine neither our location, which is in the heart of Europe, nor our culture and our European identity, nor the future of our people as European nations in the European family, in European countries, having European political, institutional and economic standards. The Western Balkan is Europe. As I said earlier, as much as transatlantic ties are stronger and stable, the Western Balkan is stronger, stable and prosperous. Joint engagement of the United States and European Union in the Western Balkan is essential. European Union has to find itself again, return to its roots, return to Schuman and Adenauer. Finally, in the spirit of this topic today, and the importance of the renewed, restored and stable transatlantic ties, I would like to finish by using President Joe Biden's words, saying, America is back. I will add it to that, Western Balkan is back, and European Union should be back, so we can all together move forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Prime Minister Zoran Zaev. The time has definitely come for a breakthrough. The time has definitely come for the EU to keep up its promises and to begin talks with both North Macedonia and Albania. And perhaps for this reason, I would like to give the floor now to Prime Minister of Albania, Edi Rama. Edi Rama, the floor is yours. But firstly, I would have to say that you strongly criticized the EU following yet another non-decision for both Albania and North Macedonia. You even used Samuel Beckett's play, Waiting for Godot. Do you think that your argument has been widely heard? And do you believe that maybe joint pressure by both the EU and the US could make a difference this time? Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I didn't criticize the EU because criticizing is active, expressing your feeling is reactive. So I didn't criticize the EU. I just said, and I will say it again, that what's happening is more of the same, and I don't want even to continue to say more of the same. So there is as you mentioned, this, I'm gonna bring it here. There is a moment of the Samuel Beckett piece where one of the two guys says, "Shall we move?" And the other guy answers, "Let's go." And Beckett states, "They don't move." So it's very much what's happening. But to be very frank with you and with everyone, I'm not feeling it anymore at all. And I'm very serious about it. It's not just to say something, but I'm not feeling it anymore. I am not at all waiting for it, and I don't feel what I used to feel before when it came. Because, you know, you can organize for a beautiful wedding once by making everything great. And the bride at the end doesn't show up. You can do it twice by engaging again in setting a wonderful scenery with the greatest music and decoration and guests and food and all. The bride doesn't come again, and then you just say the F word and you don't organize anymore for the wedding. And if the bride comes, let's be casual. So this is what I tried to tell Zoran, you know, when I came here before the usual music coming from Europe, that we need to keep going because we haven't picked this path out of anyone's imposition or out of anything else than our own firm will. It's the only path for us, and it's not about to pack Albania and North Macedonia and the other countries, put them in a ship and send them to Europe. It's about building here in our countries states that function like every member state of the European Union. And then, will we be or not part of it? This is not up to us. It's out of our hands. We decide nothing about it. First. Second, we can do many things while this tormentous second volume of Samuel Beckett is going on. We can work together in the region. We can push together for making things better, for raising our economies, for creating bigger spaces for our entrepreneurs, for our young people, because alone and staying, let's say, with the back turned towards the region, we are too small. We are too small. But together, we are reasonably big. And thanks God, on one hand, Europe cannot tell us what to do in this region. Second, on the other hand, we can, by our actions, ease the life for all our people. Why we have to wait to be member states to make the trade in the region flow with no barriers, with no waiting for 1,000 years in a year, as the World Bank stated statistically, in trucks? We don't. Why we need to wait for the EU to be part of EU, to have free movement of people with ID cards, to have free flow of goods, services, capitals, to have one stop only in the borders for everyone, to transform the borders in practically completely fluid for people? We can't. So we need to keep going in this direction, while in the other direction, of course, we need to keep going. We'll keep going by making the reforms, by making the improvements, by fulfilling the standards every year, but it doesn't depend from us. This depends from us. It's all in our hands, and we should do it. It's absolutely absurd to have people from these countries face difficulties in crossing. It's absolutely short-sighted to think that big investments will come to our countries alone. It will not happen. It's absolutely absurd to imagine a future where our green agenda, our energy policies and strategies are not fully interconnected. So in that I find a very, very challenging and a very, very exciting path. And Albania will push all the way to make it easier for everyone in Albania to go everywhere in the region with no limits, and to open for everyone in the region to come to Albania with no limits. Simple. People from North Macedonia want to come to the beach. You have a lake, but you don't have a beach. So what does it mean? You have to wait hours to get to our beach? And who wins in that? No one wins. If you wait hours, you'll spend the money in the border, in your side of the border. We want you to spend the money on our side of the border, so to come faster. And this goes for all the aspects of life. Of course we have problems in the region. Of course we have conflicts still to be solved. But what is keeping conflicts, and namely Serbia and Kosovo conflict, unsolved, should not keep the rest undeveloped. Because we have to agree to disagree on that. And while we try to sort it out, there are so many things we can do together. And by doing so many things together, we make even that less harder to be dealt with. So we live in this neighborhood since, I don't know, ages. We even have contests who is the more ancient here. So our Greek brothers, of course, pretend to have come here before all of us, and we all are just descendants of them. We pretend the same. North Macedonians pretend the same. Even Bulgarians pretend that we are all connected to their being first. So, but we are here. We are here all together. And finally, after centuries and centuries, we are talking. We are seeing each other. I witnessed a great kind of boxing of words between Albin and Anna some days ago. They are again here together. This is amazing. This is really amazing. And it's something no one could imagine only a few years ago. Now we have to do things. It's very simple. And I want to conclude with one point. We entered the Berlin process all together because we were called by the Pope of EU, Merkel. And of course, as the great believers of the EU religion, we all ran to the audience with the Pope. And for the first time in our life, but also in the life of our countries, we found each other together in the same table. Not to dispute the past, but to see how we can build a common future. It was a U-turn, and this brought new things. And when this also started to stumble in front of the Brussels bureaucracy, we decided to go further and to own the process, because, okay, you know, all due respect for the Holy See in Berlin, but we have to do more, and it's not up to them to solve our problems, to make our deals, to discuss instead of us. It's our responsibility. They have done something really great by putting us together. Now we have to push. And there is no question that there is no overlapping between becoming a member of the European Union and creating the common single market, creating the Schengen area for us. And we named it like this just to give the idea what it is about. It's about a space where the 4 freedoms of Europe are implemented fully. Movement of people, goods, capital, citizens. And this is not an alternative to the European integration. This is giving more to our people by using the potential of all of us together. And there is no question about it. So, but God forbid to make it like the Europeans did, a consensual 6, and if someone is not okay, nobody moves. Bulgaria doesn't want, the whole Europe doesn't move. No. We have time to be trapped in this, but we cannot create a trap of our own by having a Western Balkan 6 mechanism where it's consensus. No, there's no need for consensus. This is free, this should be free. Every country should decide. Whoever wants to make deals towards the common single market, not with everyone, but just with some, it's okay. Albania will make with all. As soon as possible, as much as possible, all the way. Because this is what is good for our people. And no other country can pretend a uniformed behavior of every other country. So in this, I think, there is nothing, not there is nothing to lose, there is all to win, all to win. And we had a meeting with Zoran and Alexander a few days ago in Zoom, and we made a statement, and we don't even need to say anymore to these guys coming from Europe that, listen, if you don't take us, others will take us. Third actors will come to us. Looks like we are weak grooms telling to the future brides, hey, if you don't marry me, there are some bitches that will take me. No, forget it. And we should not even express anymore any kind of, we are frustrated, we are depressed. No, we are not frustrated, we are not depressed, we are fine. We are fine, we're just fine. And frankly, if we can measure depression, they are more depressed than us in the European Union. They are more frustrated than us. So let's not talk about frustration and depression, and let everyone deal with its own by his means without complaining. We don't need to complain. We're not begging. We're not here telling, hey, listen, we are good guys, we are behaving, why you don't want us? No, no. We are just, growing kids because we came late in this. We had terrible history, we had terrible constraints, and of course we know that we are not ready to become members. But come on, First international conference, like the day of baptizing the kids and devoting him to God. What is first international conference? And conference in Zoom. So for a conference in Zoom, they are keeping us on hold, like they are giving us, all their house for. You don't want to have the first international conference? No problem. One conference less. We can have conferences here in Prespa. More. So what is this? No, it's really, it's really, because I just wonder, when these guys meet me, they look to me like, poor man, how we can consolate him. Because by the way, the Poles have been great. The Austrians have been great. That's why they are here. That's why they are here. That's why no Dutch is here. Yeah. So, but they look at us, and what to tell the guys, how to tell them, listen, you are great, don't worry, we are with you. Oh, yeah, you are with us. You are not with us. You are in Austria, you are in Poland. We are here. So no need for that, really, no need for that. We are not missing, really, the first international conference, intergovernmental conference, because we know what it is. And there are so many conferences in the way. And they make it like this is the day, the D-Day, the second liberation after Second World War. We have this international, intergovernmental, whatever, because they have also the names which are very sexy. No, no. They can do whatever they think. They can be stuck in their consensus mechanism. We feel for them. We're sorry. We're sorry, guys. We are with you. We will support you all the way. Don't worry. Anytime. And if you are bored, you have one place to have fun. It's named Western Balkans. In no other place you can have the fun we are having here, all of us together. So don't think we are depressed. No, we are good. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Prime Minister Rama. Of course, you shouldn't be depressed. And of course, obstacles are on the way, and I'm very glad to hear that you're finding ways to talk to each other, to meet each other. It's a great opportunity to have both Prime Minister of Serbia, Ms. Ana Brnabić, and Prime Minister of Kosovo, Albin Kurti, in this room. And with these words, I would like to welcome Prime Minister of Serbia, Ms. Ana Brnabić, for her intervention, and perhaps to ask her to what extent she agrees with what Prime Minister Rama said. Thank you. Whenever you like, wherever you like.
Thank you very much. I apologize for being late. I had a meeting with Philip Ricker, so again, being this EU-US synergy, I had to stay for that meeting. Well, you could all hear and understand my colleague Edi Rama very clearly. He was very direct and very straightforward. So, you know, I cannot emphasize enough that, you know, we are not frustrated and depressed. We are beyond that. So, you know, it's a new kind of liberalization for us. You know, as you could hear Edi, you know, for the time being, you're depressed, frustrated, and then you do not expect anymore anything, and you're liberalized. And that's, I think, how we all feel, which is a great feeling, and we wouldn't have it without the EU, actually. So thank you very much for that. We went 360 degrees altogether in this. I have to say that, you know, that brings, as Edi said, some new things in the regional cooperation. I think we all continue doing what we need to do to continue with our European integration. But at the same time, I think we are placing increasingly more focus on regional cooperation, on the things that we can do together to increase the quality of life of all of our citizens. And that's good, that's fantastic, because those are the things that we can actually influence. And European integration, at the end of the day, whatever you do, it is really down to each and every EU member state to decide whether you will progress or not. And it's a complex and complicated process, and it gets more complex and more complicated by the day, as we have seen with North Macedonia, and I have to say that. It's no longer about about the European values. It's no longer about the progress in the key area, and that's the rule of law. It's now also about the bilateral issues, and not even the bilateral issues as such, more issues of linguistics, history, interpretation of linguistics and history, and so on and so forth. So those are the things that you cannot even begin to influence. There are other things that make our European integration more complicated, and I'll mention perhaps one or two. You know, Serbia is, even in this IGC that we had, which was actually very positive, always reminded by some of the EU member states about the national minority rights. And that is actually fantastic because, in my view, human and minority rights are one of the key European values. But in terms of respecting the national minorities, Serbia is one of the leading countries in Europe, as stated by the Council of Europe, OSCE, European Parliament on many occasions, because we have different mechanisms in which we respect the national minority rights. The National Councils of National Minorities, the Republic Council of National Minorities, language that has to be respected. More than 15, some of our municipalities, local governments have more than 15 official languages because of the national minority rights. But then there is such a thing as going above the board in the EU. So there are EU member states that do not recognize some of the national minorities that you have in your country. And in Serbia, there is a clear law. If people feel like Vlachs or Bunjevci, you have to get them to have National Minority Council. But some of the EU member states do not recognize them. And so they're saying, until you sort this out, because they're not national minority, you cannot move forward in your European integration. So it becomes the game of giving too much of national minority rights. So you wonder, what is just right for the EU and individual EU member states? Sometimes you go above the board, I guess, in the implementation of European values. There are other things as well. There are EU member states that do not have the Institute of National Minorities. In their countries, they don't have national minorities. Everyone is of the nationality of that country. But they still have the right to tell you that you are not doing enough for the national minorities that you have, you recognize, and you respect. So again, those are different standards that I have to be very honest, are not clear to me. But to go back, that makes us work more and better together. And I was particularly proud today when I landed at the Ohrid airport, turned on my cell phone and received a message that there are no roaming charges. And not just for North Macedonia, but also for Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, and Albania. I participated in that, and no one can take that away from me and the people sitting here. That is the most tangible thing that we can do for our citizens. That is when they feel that we have actually accomplished something for them. And that is the value that Serbia is aspiring to. So I'm looking forward to continuing those kind of projects. Granted, there are obviously extremely important, very complex political issues that we still have to sort out. And I'm referring predominantly to Belgrade-Pristina dialogue. But there are so many other things that we can do for our citizens, leaving politics aside, because we owe this to our people, and we owe this to the future generations in this region in order for them actually to stay. If we don't do it, what you see here is probably the only people who will stay in the region and live and still quarrel. So we have to do something for people to stay in the region. Roaming agreement was one of those examples. Finally, I would like to say that Prespa Forum is, I think, fantastic thing. I'm the one who says always that we have perhaps too much of regional meetings, and they take away from your time, and you have to spend more time in actually delivering to your citizens and your businesses. But I think this one actually really, really matters, because it celebrates the agreement that came out of a very difficult and complex dialogue that will hopefully remind all of us every year that dialogue matters. That dialogue matters, and that only through dialogue you can reach a compromise, leave the past to the past, and turn towards the future. And so I think in that respect it's a unique event, and I thank you, Zoran, for initiating it. Finally, on the EU-US synergy, 30 more seconds. Serbia is in a very specific position. When we talk about EU-US synergy in forums like this one, what we talk usually about is Euro-Atlantic integration. Serbia is the country which is committed to European integration, not Atlantic integration. In that respect, we are a bit different from everyone here, apart from Bosnia and Herzegovina. We want to join the European Union. We do not want to join NATO. We are military neutral and committed to our military neutrality. So in that respect, we have fantastic bilateral cooperation with the United States, increasing and strengthening it on all levels, political, economic, but in that respect, I think there are countries that differ also in the Western Balkans, because some are pro-Euro-Atlantic and some are only for European integration. But thank you very much, Zoran, again, and I congratulate you on all of your successes. And again, just as a final note, I have to, from talking about regional cooperation, I have to hurry back home from here, because at 5:30 today we have a Zoom call to discuss our regional cooperation. So I'm meeting them both physically and online within 12 hours to discuss our joint projects. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Prime Minister Ana Brnabić. You're so right with your argument that there are EU member states that do not recognize minority rights. And I heard yesterday a colleague of mine commenting in another panel that if the current EU member states had to fulfill the criteria the Western Balkan 6 had to, practically none would have ever made it, would have never made the grade. Now, you also mentioned the values of the cooperation among the Western Balkan 6, and I was wondering, and I would like to welcome now Prime Minister of Kosovo, Mr. Albin Kurti, whether he assesses that this is the best possible response towards the delays of the EU or Euro-Atlantic integration of the Western Balkan 6, And Mrs. Barnabic, the Prime Minister of Serbia, also mentioned that dialogue matters. I would like your assessment and whether there are specific criteria for dialogues that need to or seek solutions to conflicts in the region. Mr. Albin Kurti, Prime Minister of Kosovo, the floor is yours.
Honorable Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, allow me to start this short address by stressing that the Republic of Kosovo shares disappointment with EU's refusal to open accession talks with Albania and North Macedonia for a second time, sending a discouraging message to our region and our reform agenda. Being the only country whose citizens are being denied visa liberalization, believe me, we fully understand the frustration, yet we must show strength and patience and not take hasty decisions which don't serve neither the interests of our countries nor the interests of our citizens and our region. Yes, EU is slow. Yes, it lacks unity, but still EU is our best hope and, to be honest, is the only alternative we have. Not because we don't have a choice, but because we naturally belong there. Western Balkans 6 is part of Europe, surrounded by EU countries. We share the same values, have a common history, we fought in the same wars, and our citizens and our economies are connected. So instead of continuing to be frustrated with EU, we need to ask ourselves what kind of future we want and what are we doing to get there. Because after all, we ourselves are far from perfect, and if we take an internal gaze, an introspection at ourselves, we realize that we have many problems. There is a struggle of democratization against autocrats and of rule of law against the criminals and monopolies. Some struggle with facing of the past and acceptance of the truth, pretending that we can build trust among our societies and our people if we just ignore what happened, or hoping that if we refuse to recognize the reality for far too long, it will somehow change. We need to look inwards, because if we pose the questions right, we may already have the answers to them. It is a fact that we struggle with implementation of fundamental rights, such as a functioning democracy and rule of law and independent judiciary, developed and competitive economy, freedom of opinions and religions, respect for human and civil rights, minority rights, for which we should ask and listen minorities themselves, a free press and political climate where opposition is not suppressed. So, yes, a big part of the responsibility relies in EU, but we must also do our homework. What we cannot do is to avoid our responsibilities with actions which end up creating even more confusion and division among ourselves, and in return, opportunity for others to exploit. Of such is the Novi Sad idea of the so-called mini Schengen. It is an initiative which holds no vision for the region, and as such, the Republic of Kosovo strongly rejects it, and it urges everyone to commit themselves to the EU agenda and to transatlantic relations. Dissatisfaction with European Union should not become instrumentalized by countries who dislike NATO or endorse Russian Federation. In Tirana, at Western Balkan 6 Summit, I proposed a framework for cooperation which is forward-looking and brings benefits for all. Here I want to raise three issues which are of great importance for our region and our transatlantic cooperation, and which are similar to the 3 points made in our parliament by Foreign Minister of Italy, Mr. Luigi Di Maio, in his recent visit to Pristina. First is democratization of the Western Balkans. We must speed up the reforms which make our transition to functional democracies. As someone who represents a country who fought for centuries, we understand more than anyone the value of freedom. But freedom itself is not enough without the democratic institutions to materialize it, for we have seen it taken away internally from dictators and autocrats. We need a functioning democracy to institutionalize freedom. A democracy where the supreme power is vested in the people. A separation of powers that keeps in check the authorities and holds elected representatives to account. With freedom of speech and freedom of media, with rights to protest and critique, without the fear of intimidation and prosecution. But also a democracy with economic freedoms where everyone has a decent chance in life. That is why we as Democrats promote social democracy. Because we understand that just like freedom needs democracy, democracy itself needs social justice. An understanding that the invisible hand that drives the free market and growth needs also the visible hand of the government to make sure that everyone has a fair shot and everyone pays their fair share. Second is the security in the Western Balkans. In this part, there isn't much to discuss really. The region must become part of NATO. Only by becoming NATO members will we be able to answer the security question for the region, and I believe that now is the time to make concrete progress, because for the next 4 years we have a President of the United States who has the experience and knows Europe and its complexities. And third is the unity of Europe. By welcoming Western Balkan 6, the European Union would increase its internal strength, self-confidence and cohesion while reducing its external borders and threats. To this end, we welcome initiatives which are based on equality, reciprocity and recognition of the reality and truth. Acknowledging that we need a lot of work to do and realizing that the current framework of regional cooperation is not sufficient to prepare us for EU accession, we have proposed a new framework of cooperation called CEFTA, according to the model of EFTA-EEA. With the Berlin process coming to an end, CEFTA, Southeast Europe Free Trade Area, is the right answer to move forwards because it renews the commitment of the region to reforms and hopes for EU integration. And lastly, I believe that all this can be achieved through a close cooperation between European Union and the United States. In this direction, there must be full synchronization of Brussels and Washington to leave no room for neither Moscow nor Beijing for exploitation. Thank you.
Prime Minister Kurti, thank you so much. Now I'm turning to Mr. Zoran Zegeltia, Chairman of the Council of Ministers in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Well, Mr. Zegeltia, Prime Minister of Kosovo, Prime Minister Kurti, explained the reasons why Kosovo is not part of this Novi Sad idea of this mini Schengen, you name it. I mean, we're still waiting for the official name of this cooperation among countries of the Western Balkans. Could you also explain to us why Bosnia and Herzegovina is saying no? And what is your assessment about the possibilities that the EU-US synergy could bring to the region? Thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I first thank Prime Minister Zaev for organizing this meeting and opportunity to address this gathering. For all of you who do not understand the language I speak, I do hope that you'll understand what I'm saying. What Mr. Kurti has said is something that we have heard several times. We've heard his reasons on a number of occasions, but let me tell you why we are for the Mini-Schengen initiative, why we think it is a good initiative for the entire region. At the very beginning, where Prime Ministers Rama, Zaev and President Vucic presented the Schengen initiative, there was no support from within Bosnia-Herzegovina. But in our internal dialogue, we understood the message. Although there is an agreement that the Mini-Schengen is a good framework within which the countries of the Western Balkans can work together and cooperate with each other in preparation for EU integration whenever the EU decides to accept or not accept us. And it is quite evident that we'll be waiting for a long time. Now, I saw in the invitation letter a number of very important and interesting topics, challenges, EU perspectives, our future. As regards the EU perspective, I do not want to say anything new. What we have not heard already, because two parties are needed for EU perspective. We need the EU and we need our perspective. The way they look at us from Europe, we heard from our previous speakers, and not much can be added. So there is a misunderstanding of the Western Balkans, there is a misunderstanding of the problems and challenges, and introducing criteria and conditionality that was never introduced to anyone acceding the EU before. This discourages the citizens of the Western Balkans. This discourages those who were great supporters of the EU. And also strengthens those who've always been anti-EU integration. And we do know that there are some of those who oppose, and there will always be those who support. But there are also countries who've never stopped supporting us, such as Austria. They've always been our friends. They've always been committed to our EU perspective. We are fully confident that they'll manage to impose the policy whereby it is necessary for the Western Balkans to be part of the EU. In Bosnia-Herzegovina, there are a few foreign policy topics where the politics and public fully agree. The membership in the EU is one of them. Irrespective of the fact that this process was launched almost 20 years ago, our citizens have never lost their faith in the process. And nowadays, most, but the majority of our citizens, irrespective of their ethnic background, the entity they come from, are committed to the EU. And we are prepared to implement those reforms that we agree upon together, not for the sake of Europe, but for our own sake. Sometimes, though, it seems to me that Europe fails to recognize the problems and successes achieved at the Western Balkans. You'll recall the narrative about and the story of our common state, dissolution, tragic wars, and attempts to build modern countries, albeit small, with insufficiently built infrastructure. Let me remind you that Bosnia-Herzegovina left the common state without a single kilometer of highway, that we had to transform our economy, the structure of the economy that had been based on a big state with 20 million people and a closed market. So we had to transform our small, closed economy to an open economy exposed to all big markets. And then we had all sorts of problems of privatization. On top of that, we had this unfortunate COVID that actually captured us, that apprehended us, that divided us, where we felt left on our own and even forgotten at one point of time. At one point of time, for our own money, we could not buy vaccine products. And then, all of a sudden, today, they are being offered to us as a donation. These are things that are discouraging. These are things that create mistrust among our citizens. Indeed, what to say? Prime Minister Zaev has gathered us to discuss EU perspective. Macedonia became a candidate country back in 2005, and I'm doing my best for Bosnia-Herzegovina to become a candidate in 2021. But then what's the message? What happens next when you become a candidate country? We need to work for ourselves, not just for the EU. As regards our common future, we'll best create it together, conjointly. As for roaming, this is an unprecedented success. No need to elaborate on it. But these things get forgotten soon. But this is a result. This is an outcome of our conjoint efforts. No matter whether the EU wants us or not, and no matter when it finds the time to have us, we need to connect our countries. We need to be connected infrastructure-wise. We all have our highways leading to the EU. And then the communications among and between ourselves, especially Bosnia-Herzegovina with some neighboring countries, is poor. The way we treat our hauliers at the borders, how we treat our certificates on the origin of proceeds, how we treat our veterinary certificates. This is not good. Is it really possible that the food that one country places on its market is not safe for other countries in the same region? Are we really prepared to do something about this? In Bosnia-Herzegovina, while waiting for the EU decision, this mini-Schengen, or whatever we call it, seems to be the best framework within which we can improve our cooperation, enhance our economies, our society and democracy, including what's been discussed often, minority rights. I'd like to call on all of us here to ensure better cooperation, to build better infrastructure connecting us, to boost economy and build trust overall, because without trust, things will be much harder to do. And we can trust each other in the area of tourism, in the area of economy. These are all areas where we stand a pretty good chance and where we can do a lot. Thank you very much for this opportunity to address this floor.
Mr. Tegeltia, thank you so much. Now I will give the floor to the Federal Minister for European and International Affairs of Austria, Mr. Alexander Schallenberg. And I think you are in a hurry because you wouldn't like to miss your flight. However, just a short question. Austria is one of the strongest supporters of the Union's enlargement, and namely for the beginning of talks for North Macedonia and Albania. How do you assess what you have been hearing so far, the cooperation among the Western Balkans? And of course, you will be talking about how do you see the resetting of EU-US synergy towards the Western Balkans. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And let me start, dear Zoran Zaev, the Prime Minister, say thank you for organizing this. It's really great. Thank you to you as well. It's like a family gathering. And when you gather as a family, you don't shy away from the one or the other open word. And having listened to Prime Minister Edi Rama beforehand, I was silently wondering when Vienna will announce our accession to the Western Balkans. I have to say, however, Central Europe is a fun place too. Maybe it was too much fun, too much animated, too much emotional in the 20th century. And our aim was exactly to become a duller place, to become a more predictable place. to become a little bit more boring. And you could say this is probably the secret aim of the US-EU cooperation, to make us all a little bit duller and more predictable in the long run. And unluckily, Edi Rama is not among us anymore, but I would say, whether it's casual or not, one thing is sure, a marriage will take place. I had to do that for obvious reasons. Now, since I have to rush, and luckily, I just want to make 2 points which are important to me. And maybe they're less addressed to you than to my EU friends. When we look back at the 20th century and the success story of the European integration and the different stages of accession, then we have to realize one thing. Accession was never a bureaucratic, procedural, legalistic approach. It was always a political endeavor. It was always an endeavor to enlarge the sphere where our model of life prevails. If we look at 1981, the Greek accession, it was a young democracy which needed support, which needed safeguarding. If we look at 1986, Spain and Portugal, same story. And even the enlargement of 2004, 2007, and 2013 were exactly about that. And frankly saying, if we had treated the countries joining after 2004 the way we treat the Western Balkans, probably they would not yet be members of the European Union and would probably have turned to other influence areas. So I believe what we have to realize in Brussels, this is a political endeavor. This is a political effort. This is about the model of life. And if I look at this map, it's obvious there's only one perspective. And I hate the word backyard. And luckily to my copyright goes to my Slovenian colleague, Anče Logar. He said, it's not the courtyard, it's the patio. It's a European patio. It's surrounded by the building of the European Union. It's in the very center. There's no region which is more European in many senses of the word than the Western Balkan. So I believe this is something which is for us as Europeans, as EU, the geopolitical task number one. And very frankly, if we fail here, if we don't deliver, and I don't believe a second that we will fail and we won't deliver, but if we don't deliver here quickly, then we shouldn't talk about geopolitics in other areas of the world, because this is our immediate neighborhood where we have to prove that we walk the walk, that we only talk the talk, but you also walk the walk. Second point, and here I agree fully what my predecessors have said today here, don't wait for the accession. We are too much focused on accession, and I believe Zygmunt will agree with me. We had a very interesting debate among the EU foreign ministers, because it was very clear, and it has to be clearer to us in Brussels too, we should not reduce this region to the accession issue, to the accession procedural aspects. This region has a lot more to offer. We Austrians know it because we have such a close emotional and human bondage and linkage to the region. But there are many other things, and I think what you are doing regionally, even without us to a certain degree, your common market, your mini Schengen, everything, it's great. And I have to underline the initiative, when Buya started with the B6, is brilliant. It's great. This is exactly what works in we created the Central 5. This is something that works. You create a human bonding between the decision makers in this region, and you don't need a guy from Brussels sitting at the table. You don't need a guy from Washington sitting at the table. Get your act together. It's your ownership. It's your own life. It's your own region, and I think this is great. But having said so, there's more than we can do from EU side. I think here again we should be more creative, more innovative. We can include the Western Balkans without waiting for the accession in many programs. We can have you as program country in Erasmus+. We should have you fully associated in Horizon Europe in the research program. We should have you fully associated in the vocational training programs. We can think of so much more we can do in this area. Like the roaming, it's great that you do it regionally, but I'm very much in favor, and Austria is very much in favor of including in the EU roaming area and regulations, so that there is no difference whether you're in Lisbon, Helsinki, Belgrade, or Podgorica, or here in Ohrid. And that should be the sign we want to show to the people in this region and to the people in the European Union. Finally, just a couple of points on actually the true subject, the resetting the EU-US energy, and I have to say Europe was never gone, so we don't have to come back. I believe here again there are many things we can do. For instance, I'm in favor of continuing the Berlin process, very strongly in favor of it. It has been useful, it has proven useful in the past, and as has been said beforehand, it was the first place where everybody got together. And I would say, why not add a strong transatlantic access to it? Why not get the Americans on board in the Berlin process, to add to it and to have to listen also what the Americans can contribute. I believe that we as Europeans should become better in coordinating our assistance to the region with the Americans beforehand. This is a common Western endeavor. And yesterday at the opening, it was reminded to us again that here again, in the past, in difficult hours, EU, US, NATO stood together. And we have to do this again. It has to be a common effort by all of us. And I believe here as European Union, we can become better in coordinating with the US. I believe the Slovenian presidency has got it right when they have said we have to work closely with the Western Balkans on disinformation, on hybrid warfare, on cyber threats. Here, for instance, we have in Brussels the Stratcom task force in the Western Balkans. We should talk more with you guys, but we can add the Americans in that too. So you're not always confronted with once Brussels and then Washington, but that we are working together on that. And last but not least, the little point where we have been starting to work with the Americans, we are starting now an exchange of young diplomats in our Western Balkan departments in the Foreign Ministry, the State Department and Foreign Ministry in Vienna. And I would say the EAS, the External Action Service of the European Union in Brussels, should think about something similar, having young American diplomats in their ranks on the Western Balkan files and young European diplomats in the ranks of the State Department on the Western Balkan files. There's a couple of ideas more addressed to my EU partners than to you guys, but again, thank you, Søren, for having me here. It's a great pleasure, and please don't get it wrong if I have to stand up and run away right away. Thank you very much.
Okay, Minister Schallenberg, thank you so much. Now I'm turning to Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland, Zbigniew Rau. Your counterpart from Austria said to the Prime Minister of the Western Balkan States to not wait for the accession, that many other things the EU could offer. Do you agree? Which are these things? And of course, we would like your ideas about the EU-US synergy towards the Western Balkan States. Thank you.
Prime Ministers, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, friends, I must say that I have noticed a change in the mood that prevails in this hall compared to the panel that I had the opportunity to listen to last night. Yesterday, the mood was more optimistic. Now it's more, how should I put it, metaphorical. So let me turn to some points to the metaphor brought to our discussion by Prime Minister Rama. I have in mind the story with the bride that is persistently not emerging at her own wedding. You see, Poland and 9 other countries joined the European Union 17 years ago. And we already at that time, we had many occasions to realize that the EU was a capricious bride. Now the EU is 17 years older, and everything indicates that it's much more capricious. It's simply aging. So the question is, what are you supposed to do in this situation? So, and as a good Christian, I cannot help but referring to the Old Testament, and you probably remember a scene in the paradise when God is bringing Eve to Adam, and he says, okay, Adam, choose your wife. And he chose. And I suppose we 17 years ago were in the same situation. There was only one bride, and the wedding took place. And the same bride, 17 years later, more capricious, will emerge at your wedding, because the choice that we had and the choice you have now is exactly the same choice Adam had in the paradise. In other words, there is no choice. Why is that? Why is that? Well, I suppose this is so because the world around us is unpredictable and fragmented. The COVID-19, the technological revolution, emerging security threats, including in the European neighborhood, are just a few examples of what is shaping the global scene. And in this context, I believe transatlantic cooperation and ties with countries that share our core values are more important than ever. We believe that strong transatlantic cooperation is crucial for both sides of the Atlantic. We highly appreciate US determination to further revitalize the transatlantic bond, as showed President Biden's first overseas trip to Europe. Just as Europe needs America's political and military engagement, the US draws great benefit from its leadership role in NATO. Poland and the US have visibly strengthened the security and defense cooperation in recent years. The enhanced defense cooperation agreement signed between our countries last year reflects our commitment to enhancing bilateral cooperation and the deterrence and defense posture along NATO's eastern flank. A strong and united NATO is the best guarantor of peace and stability for the Euro-Atlantic area. My country is also contributing to strengthening the NATO defense and deterrence capabilities in the Western Balkans and Black Sea region, participating in the tailored forward presence in Romania and tailored assurance measures for Turkey. Also, Poland exceeds the 2% of GDP NATO target for defense spending. Still, bolster our efforts, we need to restore faith and trust in international partnerships and institutions, and as well as more broadly in multilateralism. We also need to work hard to stay united on the most pressing issues. And this is also true in relation to the Western Balkans. I dare say that the US and the EU have a similar strategic vision of the Western Balkans' future. Strategic vision. We want to encourage stability, economic development, resilience against external threats, and integration with the EU. On Monday, I had the pleasure of hosting in Rogalin the meeting of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the Visegrad Four and the Western Balkans in the framework of the Polish presidency of the Visegrad Group. I will repeat it. I expressed my deep disappointment with current relative lack of progress in the EU enlargement policy. I also pointed out that Poland and V4 will continue to advocate for swift progress where it is long overdue. We hope and expect the accession negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia to finally start, hopefully in the coming months. We also look forward to opening the first cluster with Serbia in 2021. Our message is clear. You can count on Poland and the V4, both politically and practically, in relation to the enlargement policy, but also other aspects, such as the inclusion of the Western Balkans in the framework of the Conference on the Future of Europe. EU enlargement and support for the Western Balkans in the area where we also want to work in tandem, not only with the European institutions, but also other partners who share our strategic vision, including the US and Japan. As we discussed last month during our meeting with my counterparts in the V4 plus Japan format in Warsaw. What I also said in Rogalin, however, is that I would like to encourage our Western Balkan friends to remain persistent and maintain a clear pro-European direction, internally and externally. We know from our own experience how difficult this wedding with a capricious bride is. But we also know that this wedding, let me stick to this metaphorical terminology, is the best investment in the stability and prosperity of your and our societies. I was glad that all of my Western Balkans counterparts seemed to agree on this point. Euro-Atlantic integration of the Western Balkans remains unfinished business and remains a soft spot in ensuring Europe's stability and security. Poland consequently supports NATO's broad cooperation with Western Balkan countries regarding political and military dialogue and reforms-oriented assistance. We also advocate fostering EU-NATO cooperation in the region in countering hybrid threats and disinformation, as well as building strong, resilient state structures. NATO and EU strategic communication on Western Balkans should respond to third countries' narratives and be clear on the benefits of the integration. And this is our common task. We encourage further progress on regional cooperation, reconciliation, and good neighborly relations. We have seen examples of solidarity from the EU and its members, by far the biggest provider of assistance to the region during the pandemic, as well as within the region. We understand that the key is now to accelerate mass vaccinations. The EU has delivered the first batches of vaccines in the past months, and Poland will also do its part by providing 2 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine in parts proportional to the population of all 6 Western Balkan partners. The recovery will be challenged, but as we all agree, it will also offer new possibilities. The EU's economic and investment plan for Western Balkans is a good instrument with clearly defined priorities, which has a great potential that has to be fully utilized. And here I would also like to emphasize the role of the Free Seas Initiative. We see it a key format for regional cooperation in Central and Southeastern Europe, with the potential to enhance the EU cohesion and at the same time to strengthen transatlantic relations. We are open to cooperation between the countries of the Free Seas Initiative and partners from the Western Balkans in joint implementation of strategic infrastructure projects, thus strengthening connections in transport, energy, and digital sectors. We also see here the need to further strengthen cooperation with our American partners, especially in the field of energy security, as well as cybersecurity and the creation of secure infrastructure that will foster a resilient digital economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Rao, and thank you for mentioning the Conference for the Future of Europe and the fact that either the leaders or the citizens of the Western Balkans do not participate in this process of the dialogue. It involves also them. And now I would like to call Ms. Mailinda Bregu, Secretary General of the Regional Cooperation Council, for her intervention to refresh a little bit the panel discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, honorable Prime Ministers, dear ladies and gentlemen. I know that when you are the last speaker, the passions were pretty thin, so I will not be too long. A lot of relations, I was thinking, had to be reset in this region, including on the regional initiatives. When I started my job at RCC 2 years ago, we were asked, and it was actually the time a study, that the regional initiatives should be synchronized. Now I see, frankly, that there are proposals and more proliferation of regional initiatives about to happen in the Western Balkans. Anyhow, the Regional Cooperation Council started, and it was the Stability Pact more than 20 years ago that it gave birth to the Regional Cooperation Council. It brought together at that time the leaders to draw on and to find some ways to set the course of cooperation in the Western Balkans around peace, security, stability, and development nexus. Now that we have the Regional Cooperation Council, we see that the region, as it's happening with everywhere in the world, is changing fast. And I have to say that this is one of those few examples where we see that member states, EU member states and USA sit together and discuss on the regional agendas. The EU support in the region, I have to say, is steadily increasing in the last years. So do not take me ill. We just launched the Balkan Barometer for this year, and we made a comparison with 5 years ago, 2016. We have 62% of support on the EU membership expressed today by the citizens of Western Balkans, while that was 39% on 2016. Now I'll leave to you the interpretation. This might be, first, let's say, an overwhelming figure, that the Western Balkan citizens are fully supporting the EU membership because they still believe it's a great thing. It might be, let's say, a trick reading behind it, and it's actually the trick that happens with big numbers, and they hide something in underground. Because people from the region are joining the EU one by one, and they might see this EU membership as the chance to leave their countries. What reinforces this reading of ours is the fact that 71% of the young people in the region, when they are asked where you'd like to live and if you have a chance to leave your countries and find a job in the EU, are you going to do that? 71% reply, yes, we would like to leave from the Western Balkans and live in EU. So I think that these are some of the factors that might really make us all think that these are the years that we are emptying the economies of the region. And this is like an alarming bell for, definitely for leaders, but for all of us who do work with the regional cooperation processes. I have to say again that the prospect of eventual EU membership has been a driving force during all these years for all the Western Balkan countries. If you just bring in mind the deep reforms that our countries had to go through, then this will really resonate like a sound fact. It has been, again, the predominant factor in urging the countries of the Western Balkans to engage with one another in a more positive manner, as well as to address the domestic problems they face, but also the unresolved issues in the region. Now, for all of us, 20 years ago, would be difficult to speak of trade, technological development, startups, digital agenda, smart cities, human capital investments. 20 years ago, it would have been quite impossible for the citizens to accept the fact that the best one who might really help them, and the first one, the immediate one who might help them, is going to be their neighbor. And today, for 77% of people in the region, they choose regional cooperation as the mantra to move forward. Now, I know that there are agendas that we are all developing that cannot come from a computer. Those require leaders to deliberate choices measured by their actions and their words. I am glad and proud that even here today, roaming-free agreement in the Western Balkans was mentioned highly. It started yesterday. I am proud that we coordinated it from RCC. It wouldn't have been possible without our partners, European Commission. It wouldn't have been possible without the willingness and the leadership of the leaders of this region, and as well then transposed in those regulatory authorities. Now, just a short remark here, because still I think it's 24 hours, less than 24 hours, so maybe there is still time to arrange things rightly. Still today, I keep receiving messages and comments from different people in the region that their telecom operators have not started to respect from yesterday the roam free. I would plead, dear Prime Ministers, to check with your regulatory bodies. We are doing it since yesterday, frequently, but still those concerns are present. The agreement is clear. Whenever does not respect it, then it should start to have, like, from the fines until the abolishment of the contract. I leave that to you, but it's worrisome that regional agreement that was reached, and I have to say it's a great one, to be endangered only by some, let's say, different moods of telecom operators in the region. One last remark. Last November in Sofia, the Prime Ministers endorsed the Common Regional Market, which I keep saying, and I'm repeating myself, it's not a law of nature. It's not even a rocket science. It's just bringing together the proposals that came even through the mini-Schengen initiative, based on the 4 freedoms, and enhancing it with the digital agenda, the industrial one, and the innovation. I have to say that the endorsement of Common Regional Market was a huge success for the Western Balkans. If we can, and if we definitely can move together forward. But if we'll do that, based on the projections of the International Monetary Fund, the GDP growth in the region is going to be 6.7%. So one region, one market. At this moment that I'm delivering this intervention to you, we are still trying to find to find the solutions on the agreements that have to be tabled for Monday during the Berlin process. The most important one, the freedom of movement with ID cards in the region, and that of the third-party citizens, plus the recognition of academics and professions that we know. Again, this is not the fora to address where the problems do stand. You know where the problems are, but I would really plea you to make the most possible for now, because otherwise it's going to be a problem for Monday, and not only. Definitely it will cut into pieces then the whole process of the common regional market. Thank you.
Ms. Pregu, thank you so much. Well, this plenary session is coming to an end, and for this reason, I would really like now to call the rapporteur of the high-level plenary session, Ambassador Ervan Fouere, to take the floor with his conclusions to sum up what has been said during both panel discussions. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and distinguished guests, speakers. Trying to summarize in a few words the very rich debate that has taken place this morning would test the skills of even a writer like James Joyce. So I will not attempt to do that. But I would say that the response to the question that was put to us on the EU-US relations and the Euro-Atlantic cooperation was very clear, although of course there were some nuances with reset light, transforming, etc., but there was a general consensus that the EU-US cooperation is vital for promoting the values that we share together. The debate also heard some good news and also bad news. The good news of what has been happening in the region. Several member countries who have become members of NATO. This landmark historic agreement of Prespa, which together with the Ohrid Framework Agreement marked an extraordinary milestone, a signpost, as Lord Robertson mentioned last night, for the region. And this gives great dynamism for the capacity of the region to address many of the challenges that are still remaining. But also we saw the bad news. The bad news, how to avoid the European Union becoming like an aging grandmother, to quote the words of the Pope, the real Pope, not Angela Merkel, in his speech to the European Parliament some years ago. How to avoid the European Union neglecting the Western Balkans. How to avoid the Western Balkans becoming a battleground for competing interests. And above all, a unanimous call of everybody how to speed up the accession process and how to arrive at a lifting of this current blockage. And I think there it is important to quote several speakers on what has happened by the decision of Bulgaria, a clear failure of the European Union, to quote Commissioner Hahn, morally and politically wrong, to quote President Pahor, unprincipled, to quote Prime Minister Zaev, and finally, an inappropriate misuse of the European Union and hijacking the enlargement process to promote national interest, to quote Ambassador weaker. But we are fortified by the very strong message from the Slovene presidency that they will do all they can to revitalize the EU enlargement process. And also the call of the President Pahor on the need for a more strategic approach from the European Union for the Western Balkans, to ensure that the EU can regain the trust of the citizens, which is still very high, as we have heard, but nevertheless there is a palpable sense of frustration, not depression, but nevertheless frustration at what has been happening. So there is a need for the European Union to regain the trust of the citizens and also to rebuff the tendency towards nationalist rhetoric. There was also a very clear message from the President Pahor, which I think is important to repeat, the rejection of all ideas of border changes. And until the EU has incorporated the Western Balkans, the European Union will remain an unfinished peace project. And this is something which must remain forefront in the mind of the leaders of the European Union. So there are challenges remaining, challenges for the region, and we heard many of those challenges articulated here just now, notably by the Prime Minister of Kosovo, on all the efforts to improve the economic situation, to reduce the tendency of the youth to emigrate, to seek their fortune elsewhere, and to find ways of giving hope to the youth of the region, pending, of course, that the European Union will get its act together. But we also heard a positive news from the Commissioner about the very strong financial commitment of 9 billion euros for the region up to 2027. Also, the importance for the region to continue its efforts in fighting against corruption, the rule of law, and autocratic tendencies. And that the EU must do its homework as well, making sure that all its member states remain faithful to the fundamental values which underpin the European Union. And also, it needs to convince its own public opinion on the importance and the benefits that come from the enlargement of the European Union, and that this is to the benefit of all the citizens of Europe. And finally, I think everybody has welcomed this extraordinary initiative of the launching of the Prespa Forum Dialogue, because it has really demonstrated not only the energy, but also the very strong spirit that exists in the region to move the process forward. History was repeated many times, and the importance of the region not being prisoners of the past. So we were mentioning a number of Irish writers, and also Samuel Beckett, whom we are very proud of. But President Biden is often quoting Irish poets. He's, as you know, has Irish roots, and he's very proud of his Irish roots. But his favorite quotation is from Seamus Heaney's poem, and as you know, he got the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1995. History says, "Don't hope on this side of the grave, but then once in a lifetime, the longed-for desire of freedom comes again, and hope and history rhyme." And on that positive note, I pass the floor back to the moderator. Thank you very much.
Ambassador Faure, thank you so much for this excellent summary of what we have heard during the both panel discussion of this high-level plenary session. It has been challenging for you. It has been challenging for me to moderate all these distinguished speakers, honorable presidents and prime ministers, without having the opportunity to pose as many questions as possible. And for me, a journalist, coming from Greece, that was really challenging. I would definitely agree with you, Ambassador Fouere, that without this region, the European Union will remain an unfinished project. And I would like to thank the Prime Ministers, the honourable ministers, the distinguished speakers for their participations, and I wish all the best.
Thank you.